Hello, Moo, Purple Beard. Um, um, this is obviously you from the title. You can tell this is an ethics video. One of our duties as coaches is we're supposed to give out a copy of the code of ethics to parents, all of our employing parents, at the beginning of every year. But I'm going to just tell you how to do it online because I don't think that we should be throwing paper around like crazy. So I'm going to do this in real time. I'm going to go to I have bookmarked the info center for Skate Canada, which is at, the website is info.skatecanada.ca, and then it should take you right to the page. You don't need to sign in. I never sign in to do it. And then in the search on the upper right, I type in code of ethics. Let's see if that works. It's not the first one that comes up. Oh, good, it didn't come up. Let's try Coach's Code of Ethics. Coach's Code of Ethics, there we go. Coach's Code of Ethics policy. And then you click on that. It's divided into, I'm just going to go over a few things. I only have like 10 minutes here. It's divided into 7 sections. The first 2 sections kind of just tell you what the code of ethics is for, what it means. It's basically a guide on how to behave in order to make figure skating a positive experience for everyone involved. I should probably just read this. It's quicker than making up my own definition. Section 3 is basically general rules. Don't be a dick. It's basically that section 3. Section 4 is covers some things like, again, obvious things. Don't harass people. Don't discriminate against people. They list a bunch of stuff like that. That's basically section 4. Section 5 is obligations to parents. We're not supposed to lie to them, etc., etc. Again, all fairly obvious stuffs, but I would say that if you take every coach and go point by point through this, no coach follows all of these things in the code of ethics. And after 25 years in skating, I've found coaches, I'd say at least 50 times, I've been witness to arguments of one coach accusing another one of being unethical and vice versa. Usually it's around the central issue of solicitation. But I have found, especially when I read through it, I try to read through it every couple of years, I've found that some of the more obscure ones are broken more often because they're less known. Things like a lot of them are really vague. I actually really like the current code of ethics because I believe this is the 3rd version of it I've had since I started coaching. And the first version was terrible. It was for 2 reasons. One, it was kind of just a list of rules from 1 to 36 or something. And each one was phrased, the phraseology was a little different. So there was a lack of consistency even through the list. It didn't flow from one thing to the other. And they had, and they still have this a bit, but they have, there are certain rules in the code of ethics, certain ethical rules, certain ethical clauses that actually conflict with other ethical clauses. My big issue is early on they say that we're not allowed saying anything negative about anyone involved in figure skating. Basically, we have to constantly be positive about everything. So even if somebody does something terrible, we're not supposed to tell people about it. And I don't, it's phrased a little vaguely. So I think there's room around that. I think it's basically you're not supposed to, randomly throw names around. But if you say so and so, I don't know, if you have an actual fact that's back-upable, which is difficult because skating is not very transparent. They do not make anything transparent in skating. But let's say somebody puts something on a resume that's not true or is misrepresented, and you get a copy of that resume, you can actually say to people, look, they're lying about their record, their coaching record. But most coaches tend not to put anything on paper for that very reason. They don't want to be caught in various unethical behaviors. They tend to keep everything very, very vocal and face-to-face, deniable. I'm the exact opposite. I can't stand doing anything face to face because nobody seems to be nobody seems to be I find that people say whatever they can to get what they want when they're face to face without any thought of actually following through on their discussion, their verbal commitments, their promises, their contracts. You know, as soon as you have a conversation with someone and agree on something, that's a contract. But then I find that people who, if you don't have it written down anywhere, they're just totally free to ignore that whole conversation and deny it ever happened. And occasionally I've had people even have a conversation with me, assert one thing, and then a couple days later, in a conversation with someone else, assert the exact opposite thing and deny they ever asserted the first thing. To the point where, what's a good example? Well, I can't really give a good example. I can give a fake example. I was in a club once where I wanted to change the schedule. The free skates were all like 90 minutes long, and then they had 10 minutes of dance at the end. And I said, and no skills or something. That was a really weird mix of activities. So I said you should have like 60 minutes of free skate and 15 minutes of dance and 15 minutes of skills or something along those lines, or 15 spins, 15 dance. That's kind of the way most normal clubs work. In this club, it was a junior session, so the kids just couldn't fit 75 minutes of ice time by themselves. So I wanted it shortened. And this has actually happened several times. And usually when I talk to the other coaches, they all say they're completely in agreement, and yes, let's get it shorter. But then when they think about it, it means they might end up losing that extra 20 minutes of coaching time. And I think that ends up making them tell the executive the exact opposite. So they'll come to me and they'll all say, oh yeah, we're definitely support you in shortening the junior session to manageable skating times. And then they'll go to the executive and say, we definitely don't support changing the schedule to manageable skating times, which makes it very confusing for me because I get the unanimous agreement of all the coaches involved, go to the executive and say, okay, we're changing the time. Everybody agrees. And they're like, no. Half the coaches have come to me and said they don't agree, that they've actually told you that they're not going to let you change the schedule, when I got the exact opposite impression from the coaches. Just weird stuff like that happens on a regular basis, which is why I like to do everything now through emails and not through face-to-face conversations. There's just way too much. People flip-flop on their opinions. They're able to flip-flop way too easily if there's no written. And that's kind of in here, that you can't say, you can't flip-flop. You have to make sure you're basically honest and properly represent everyone's opinion and stuff like that. There's something else I was going to say. So there's basically three major areas in the coach's code of ethics that I think people should be aware of. And they're very similar areas. They basically all involve contact with clients, contact with coaches' clients, I usually call them parents, the parents of your students. It doesn't have to be parents. I've been hired by grandparents. I've been hired by, step-parents. I've been hired by other things. But I'm going to call them employers. So the employers, once they decide to hire a base coach, basically all skating information is supposed to be initiated by the base coach. They control all the flow of information. So anytime another coach or a club or the section or Skate Canada wants to influence that skater skating, they're supposed to go to the coach to influence it. This basically covers all three issues. The first one I mentioned is soliciting. Soliciting is a huge one in skating, where coaches will go to other parents and basically let slip some of their qualifications, or they'll do sneakier things like bring all their high-level skaters to a new club they want to go to and say, oh, look at what, and they'll just go about their business teaching their kids. But all the parents of these young, impressionable skaters will see these high-level skaters and say, oh, that coach must be better than our coach. And then there's just this gradual shift to the new coach. Also, a lot of coaches will have parents go into the stands and talk really nicely about themselves. And also, I will say there are coaches I know that don't actively encourage any of the activities, but the parents do it on their own. I've been in two clubs where there's been one parent on the board who had a coach who only had that one coach in the club. So the coach wasn't in very regularly, and the mother wanted the coach to come in more regularly. So she kept trying to push for that coach to be given more work and more students, and it just was obviously biased in everything she said towards that coach, which is pretty transparent. So most of the time it's not very effective, but I've seen people do it more effectively. And again, all of that is detailed in here as being totally off limits. You are not allowed to solicit in any way. I'll get into an exception on that later. But the second thing I mentioned is nobody outside of the base coach is allowed to initiate conversation that would affect the development of a coach's skaters. And this includes coaches, especially, but also clubs and section and Skate Canada. They are not allowed to go to the parents or the skater and try to influence their skating. They have to go to the coach. This is broken. I had this broken when I first went to Newfoundland, but in 26 years of coaching, 24 years of coaching, I very rarely had it broken. This past year is the only the second time ever in skating I've had this particular rule broken. Although, I will say the first 4 or 5 years I coached, I really didn't have a very firm grasp that I was in charge of the entire development of that skater. You know, my grasp of skating at first was just to show up when you're told to show up, give a lesson, and leave. And there was no deeper or broader or longer context in my lesson plans, usually. And very slowly over time. You know, I was told, for instance, early on that, you know, your job is to get this dance passable in 6 months. So there's a broader concept where you have to connect lessons in a development format. But then when you start becoming a base coach, it's not only a longer, but a deeper and broader and deeper process. Multi-layered process. I said deeper twice. This is probably the most concerning one of mine because I have very intricate, they're not exactly delicate development plans for my skaters, but they're very intricate and they're very hard to show people. I have many, many coaches who think I have no plan at all when I coach, which is why they don't particularly support me as a base coach. I have many club people and really people who take a short-term look at my coaching can't see any overall pattern in my coaching. It's very chaotic. It's very anarchic. But it is a very detailed, very concrete, very multi-layered and complex plan. And it's difficult enough trying to keep the parents on board. I don't really have a lot of problems with the skaters usually. Very rarely have I had problems with getting the skaters on board, but it's very difficult getting the parents on board. And it drives me absolutely nuts when other people start interfering, when people who shouldn't be interfering, when people who are listed in the Code of Ethics as not being allowed to interfere, start interfering with the development of my skaters. It literally really upsets my brain because I'm trying to develop this very fine balance of ultimate development for my skaters, and as soon as you start having people who shouldn't be putting input in, false in, whether they're trying to help or not, they're always trying to help. They're just not allowed to do it. If they want to help, they have to go through the coach, through me, not through the parents. And the third issue, which I forget, slipped my mind at the moment. There was the third one I usually see, though. It also has to do with communication. I can't remember. So the one about the base coach and not interfering with development is Rule 6.3, where all discussion has to be initiated through about the training has to be through the base coach, and that's not on ice training. That's on ice, off ice training, nutritional, weight training, cross training, sport specific training. You know, everything training. Their entire development is soliciting. I can't remember the third one. So there was a third one that I thought was very important. Anyway, I will say the exception to all this is the parents, the client, is allowed to, just like with a doctor, they're always allowed to get a second opinion. So I would encourage parents to talk to other parents, talk to other people, and try to get a variety of opinions. Now, I would be wary of the bubble mentality, the clique situation. If you go to a club, there's often a controlling clique of that club, and even though you think you're getting multiple opinions, you're actually getting the opinions of that clique. And virtually every club, virtually every coaching clique, tends to think their coach is awesome and all the other coaches suck. And I know in Metro, I think there's 7 different coaching cliques where you have a mass of a dozen people who think their coach is amazing, all these other coaches are much worse. and this coach thinks their coach is amazing, and all the other coaches are much worse, and they all believe that they have the. I mean, everybody wants to believe they're on the winning team, they're on the best team. So it's in order to get a properly diverse assessment, opinion. You not only have to go to the people you're immediately surrounded, but you should probably contact people from other clubs and other areas. I would especially go like out of province, out of country if you can, and see if you can get confirmation on, proper training methods, etc., etc. Rate of, various things. And I definitely encourage that kind of communication. More information is always better. Just be aware that the majority of I think all the information you're going to get is going to be biased and is going to be inaccurate. So you have to understand the where that bias is coming from, what that bias is, and either mitigate it by getting people with a bunch of different biases, so you get a more concrete view, or understand where the bias is coming from and why the bias is, what the bias is, and try to find some way to weave around it and remove that from whatever you're being told. Generally speaking, again, the best advice, the most honest advice you're going to get is from your base coach. They're the one who knows you. They're the one who knows your kids. They're the one who knows your financial situation, your family situation, your work situation. I think that's it. I meant this to be 10 minutes. That was way more than 10 minutes. So I encourage everyone to go online and it's like not even 2 pages long. You should be able to get all the way through the Coach's Code of Ethics. And there is a Judge's Code of Ethics and a Board Member's Code of Ethics, but it essentially all runs along the same line as the Coach's Code of Ethics. The Coach's one is the one they're more concerned about because we're the only ones who really get paid for our work. So that kind of demands a certain standard of behavior, whereas volunteers, you kind of have to take what you get, and because they're volunteering their time and not getting compensated for it, you have to be able to accept a wider range of idiosyncrasies and strange behaviors, weaknesses, strengths. So that's it. That's my blurb on this one. Went okay. I tried this another time and it didn't go well, but this one was all right. So I will put this online and send it to all my parents and leave it open for the public online. That's it. Bye.